Hi there. It's been a long time since I've posted a video to the channel, and I apologize for that. I've had a pretty busy spring making a bunch of videos, actually professional videos for work, and so the desire to edit and think of content for videos that are not work related has just been tough. So I actually have a lot of videos planned. I have one, hopefully, that I'll be finishing up soon about my neighborhood here in Chengdu. Yeah, I haven't had a lot of time, so I apologize. But anyway, trying to think of some good topics about sort of life in China, and I thought I haven't really talked a lot about this, and maybe talked a little bit about it, but talking a little bit about life as an expat and living in an expatriate community. So an expat obviously is, if you're unfamiliar, is somebody who has chosen to leave their home country and go live for a short period or a long period of time in another country. And so I can speak a little bit to the general expat experience, but obviously this video is focused primarily on my own experiences living in a second-tier city in China, in Chengdu, for the last 4 years. And so, results may differ depending on where you live. If you're an expat in Spain, the experience, if you're an American expat in Spain, the experience is going to be very different than if you're an American expat in China. So that's really what I'm focused on right now. So a couple of the points I wanted to make. One, as an expat in China, or really anywhere, in any foreign city, you have a much smaller community that you're part of. I live in a city with 14 million people. It's tough for us to get an exact count of the number of expats who live in Chengdu, but it's certainly in the 100,000 range. So it's like a small town within a huge city. You don't see a lot of foreigners out and about here in Chengdu. In certain neighborhoods you'll see more than others, but you'll never find sort of like a neighborhood that's just full of foreigners. And in places like Beijing or Shanghai you will, but in Chengdu generally no. So you're part of a much smaller community, and for the community here in Chengdu, it's actually a pretty tight-knit community. Everybody knows everybody. One of a woman that I hired about 2 years ago to come from Shanghai, had lived in Shanghai for a year and moved to Chengdu. When I picked her up at the airport, I said, "Okay, well, taking you to your to your apartment, we're going to stop at a coffee shop that my friend owns, and I'm going to introduce you to my friend Johnny, and he is someone you really should know in Chengdu." And I took her to the coffee shop. It's a little tiny hole-in-the-wall coffee shop. It's full of foreigners, and I introduced her to Johnny. I said, "You need to get this guy's WeChat," which is our means for communicating here in China. She said to me when she was leaving, she left a year later to go back to Shanghai to pursue her career there, and she said, "I thought you were crazy when you took me there." I said, "Who is this guy taking me to this coffee shop to introduce me to a guy? Like, it's weird." And she goes, "But you know what? Everybody I met here, all my friends in Chengdu, I met them through that coffee shop and through my association with Johnny originally, and that's sort of how things operate here. Is we're a welcoming group, we're a tight knit group of people. We sort of know everybody, at least by face, and sometimes by reputation. If we're not friends with them, when new people come in, we're very welcoming to them as well, which is great. So that's sort of a nice thing about living in China, or living in a smaller city. And by small city, I mean not a tier 1, not Shanghai, Beijing. I pick on Shanghai and Beijing foreigners because they have a huge expat community, and so that leads into my second point, which is that the community is very diverse. Weird little bird up here making noises at me. That's not necessarily true in other cities. It's possible in large cities, it's possible for you to have individual expat communities. So you can have a French expat community, you can have a German expat community, a Filipino expat community, and those communities sort of stick to themselves. There's a little bit of mixing between those communities, but there's enough Scottish people in Shanghai that they can all hang out together all the time, and not know all the Scottish people in Chengdu. Or sorry, in Shanghai. In Chengdu, that's really not possible. Yeah, there's a lot of Americans. There's a lot of folks from Africa and various countries in Africa here. There's a lot of Japanese people here, but almost not enough to make their own community. It doesn't have like the critical mass required to do that. And so we tend to all hang out together. And so what's really cool about being an expat in Chengdu is that your community is exceptionally diverse. I went to my weekly pub quiz at a British bar last night that I go to every week. And, my team generally consists of me as an American. So apparently Starbucks was a little too hot for my computer today, so I had to move indoors to my apartment. So my weekly pub quiz team, which is like 6 people, is an American, British or South African born Brit. We had another English guy on our team last night who's not normally there. A Polish guy, and an Indian guy, and another American. That's our typical quiz. So, pretty diverse group. Just walking around in that pub, there's about 25 to 40 people on a given Wednesday night, and it's extremely diverse in terms of where people are from, and so that's kind of a cool experience to meet people really from all over the world, including all over Asia. So not just Chinese people, not just Americans, not just Europeans, but also Filipinos, Malaysians, people from Singapore. And then the other really interesting thing about an expat community is you find people who have decided to expatriate usually have some reason that they've done so, right? Whether it's for adventure or whatever. But a lot of them also have these really interesting background stories, right? Because something sort of in them allowed them to decide to move out of their home country and go live abroad. And so a lot of times that's their childhood. So some of them have very interesting parentage, right? Their parents were very interesting people who traveled the world. And so they grew up with those experiences as well. Which sort of brings me to my next point, which is that not only do you have a diverse community and a diverse set of viewpoints, you also have a community of to some degree, like-minded people in the sense that all of us have taken a huge leap, and moving to China for me was a huge leap. And I am in awe of some of the people I meet who just sort of did it without having family here. I mean, I met my wife and moved here, and I had somebody who could sort of hold my hand through a lot of the challenging experiences that I've had here. Help me navigate through a hospital, help me set up a bank account. Didn't have to rely on people from my job who maybe didn't really want to spend their free time helping some foreigner out. So I had someone who could really help me with everything. But the expats who just come here at 22, 23 years old and just are like, I'm just going to show up in China with a backpack. It takes a lot of courage. And so these people and a lot of the older expats have been living outside of their home country for most of their adult lives. And they've been to many, many different countries where they've lived, and China may be their current stop, or it may have been a place they've lived. They've stopped for a long time. They used to live in Thailand. They used to live in Africa, and they talk about all these diverse places that they've been to, all these different places they've been to. Just sitting around the table with a group, you can talk about all these experiences of when I was here, when I was there. And that's really cool as well. They if I want to know, the ins and outs of going to, it sounds stupid, but Cambodia, because Cambodia is not too far from here, so it's not very exotic. Sounds exotic, but it's close by. Obviously, if I want to, let me use a different example. Turkmenistan, which actually also isn't too far away from here, but Africa, someplace in Africa, in Central Africa or Southern Africa or whatever. I want to go to Tanzania.
it's pretty easy for me to find somebody who is either from Tanzania or has visited extensively and can tell me all about what I need to be aware of in going there, right? So that's a great piece of being an expat, is just that you have this community that's used to living outside their home countries, and you have this wonderful shared experience with these people. We all live in China. We all have what we call China days that we really get frustrated by what's going on in our lives, with interacting with a very different culture, and so we all have each other to sort of rely upon. When I first moved to Chengdu, I didn't really branch out into that community. It probably took me, I shouldn't say, I guess I misremember that. It seems like it was a long time, but it probably took me about 2 or 3 months to sort of want to jump in and hang out with expats, because there was a part of me, and part of this was I talked to a friend, part of me that thought that was sort of like cheating my China experience, right? Like I'm not really getting into know the real China, but I learned that it's really important to maintain those ties with your home country and with your home culture when you're living abroad. So, if some of you are thinking, watching this video, I know a few people are thinking about moving to China who watch these videos, and you're thinking like, I'm gonna move to China and I'm gonna be totally Chinese. I'm gonna totally immerse myself in Chinese culture, but I hang out with any foreigners. Give it a couple months, and you're gonna realize that you made a mistake in not embracing your own heritage and your own culture, and saying like, I need to have a foot or a finger or like an elbow in that community a little bit. And for me, it's about once or twice a week that I will go to an expat bar or restaurant where I'm going to be exclusively, well, not exclusively, but mostly interacting with other foreigners in China. By the way, I think I've said it in other videos, I use this word foreigner, and to a lot of you it may sound rather offensive, but it's the term that Chinese people use to describe us, Waigoran or Laowai, which means foreign person or foreigner, respected foreigner, whatever the case may be. It means foreigner, it means outsider, and we would never use that term, obviously, if you said that in Europe, you said that in America, hey, look at that foreigner over there. I mean, it's horribly offensive. So please understand that I use that term in the way that it's used in China to refer to people who are not Chinese. Okay, so other things that are really cool. Well, one other thing that's really cool that I thought of last night is, the community that's here. We're sort of like on a spaceship or something. Like we just jumped on a spaceship on Earth and we left Earth and we're on this journey. And so, you only have one doctor, right? And you got like one guy who can cook food, and you got one engineer, right? And so whatever you got is what you got. And so in an expat community like Chengdu's expat community, whatever you are good at, whatever you can do, like chances are you might be the only person or one of a handful of people that can do that thing, with the exception of teaching. There's a lot of teachers in the community. So, for example, we have a guy here in Chengdu who several years ago, he loves like Southern barbecue. He's from Texas, and he loves Southern barbecue, and he opened up a barbecue place mostly for himself. He's one of the most successful foreign businessmen, probably in Chengdu now. He's got three stores in Southwest China. He's got 2 in Chengdu and 1 in Chongqing, that called Iron Pig, and it sells barbecue, and it's extremely successful with the expat community, but even more so with the Chinese community. They love that Southern barbecue. So, if this guy opened up a barbecue restaurant in Texas, he would get drummed out of business, because that doesn't mean his barbecue's bad. It just means that there's a lot of people making barbecue places in Texas. And so in China, there's one guy who knows how to do that. He knows how to smoke that pig. And so he did it, and he started a business, right? There's a guy from Vegas who has a pizza restaurant, and he makes pretty good pizza in Chengdu, and he's a foreigner. He runs the place, and no offense, Mike, but your pizza's not from New Haven. Your pizza's not gonna last 10 minutes where I'm from, but in China, it's pretty good pizza. It's pretty good pizza, and you know, the pepperoni's the right flavor, and the cheese is sort of the right mix of cheeses, which doesn't always happen when you go for go to Pizza Hut in China. And so what got me thinking about this is this guy I know here, Brad. He's a really young guy, and again, speaking about a diverse background, he's British. He's a young British guy. He's probably in his early 20s. He's got the gauges in his ears, the tattoos. He's sort of like, he wears black all the time, but he was raised in the United States. Like, he spent a lot of his youth, because I think his father moved to the U.S. So he spent a lot of time in the U.S., a lot of time in England. Interesting, diverse background. Understands Americans, understands Brits. By the way, if you live in America and you don't realize this, English people and Americans are not the same. I have a lot of English friends here, and we often talk about the fact that there's a big difference, in terms of our outlooks and the way, our sense of humor and all that stuff. So, but anyway, getting off the point, as I often do, Brad has a talent. Who would have known? He is really good at making chicken pot pie. And you can't get yourself a chicken pot pie in Chengdu. You can't get that. So he started making chicken pot pies here for his friends, for years. And his friends are like, "This is banging chicken pot pie. Damn, that's good. You love that at home, but you can't find it here. You can't find a frozen one in the grocery store that you can shove into your toaster oven. You can't make it yourself, most people don't know how to make a chicken pot pie. You can't go to a restaurant and it's not on the menu, right? So he got the idea, coming to quiz night every Wednesday. He's like, I'm going to put in our little quiz group chat on my phone, like, hey, anybody want a chicken pot pie with ham and, potatoes? And it's 30 RMB, which is like $5. Pre-order in the group chat, and I'll make them. And he's been doing it for like 5 weeks now, and he puts it in the group chat. When there's 150 people in the group chat, people are like, I'll take one, I'll take one, I'll take one. He comes in with a big, hot bag full of pot pies and little hamburger boxes, and everybody's eating pot pies, and we love them, right? Now, if he went and opened a pot pie restaurant in New York City, he'd be out of business in 3 weeks, because his pot pies are good, but, a lot of people can make pot pies. It's not a big deal. But in China, it is a big deal. So there's a limited market for stuff from home. There's a very successful company here in Chengdu. Actually, they just closed down because then they moved away. But their whole thing was making custom-made bikes. They weren't Americans. They were from, I can't remember where they're from, but there's Natuk bikes. And, the bikes in China are good, but they're not it's hard to get a bike like you get at home. I'm not into bikes, but I'm talking about like a mountain bike. These guys would make a custom bike for you because they knew how to make bikes. They worked in a bike shop, right? So if there's any talent that you have, you can be that guy or girl doing that thing in a second-tier Chinese city because nobody else will be doing it. And that's sort of a neat opportunity. So that's, again, I'm not in this video, I'm not really talking about life in China. I'm just talking about sort of being a part of that expat community. And again, there's nothing wrong, and it took me, again, a while to realize this. There's nothing wrong with realizing that, you're going to be homesick if you decide to go live in another country. No matter how adventurous you are, when you're speaking all day to people for whom English is not their first language, and they don't get a lot of practice speaking English. Their English is it's not going to be at the same level that you're used to speaking your native language in, whatever your native language is. And you're going to want to meet and interact with people face to face that speak your native tongue and understand your feelings about things. And so again, you might, we saw, it was definitely a troll post on Facebook the other day, but I'll throw a picture of it. It's hilarious. It's so funny because there are people who come, again, I don't think this poster was serious, but there are people who come to China and they're like, I'm going to go pray with the monks. Dude, monks don't even pray. They meditate, but I'm going to learn Kung Fu and I'm only going to hang out with Chinese people and I'm going to speak Chinese and blah, blah, blah. You're going to run screaming if you were to force yourself to do that, right? If I know a guy who works for my company who is in a tiny little town somewhere, and this guy speaks fluent Chinese. This guy speaks Chinese well enough that he can teach his high school kids in Chinese. I've watched videos of his lessons. He switches between English and Chinese seamlessly. The kids understand it. They all know he speaks Chinese. He could have the most wonderful Chinese girlfriend in this little town who doesn't speak a word of English, and they could have a real connection linguistically speaking, right? He could have a circle of friends. He'd go drinking with Chinese guys every night, and again, he'd be like, I can go drinking with Chinese guys, and after about 30 minutes, I'm kind of like, okay, what you guys are talking about anymore? I can't. The language processing centers in my brain can no longer compute the Chinese. I'm done. I'm on my phone playing a game because it doesn't make any sense anymore. And every time someone goes, "Hey, Ganbei," I'm like, "Hey, Ganbei," but I don't care anymore. This guy could keep that up all night, right? He can maintain because he's fluent in the language. He is lonely with a capital L. He is the only foreigner in this town. And he's been living in China for years. Obviously, he's developed a fluency in Chinese, but he is lonely. Being a foreigner, being the only person who speaks English, and being completely ripped out of your own culture and put into another culture is lonely. And so you need time to be with that community, and you shouldn't feel guilty about it. Now, if you decide to go live in Shanghai or Beijing, you should feel guilty if you're never eating Chinese food and you're not learning a word of Chinese and you have no Chinese friends, right? And because there it's possible not only to put your foot in or your elbow or your finger into the expat community, it's possible to just jump right in and never surface, right? You can get along in China never having to interact with Chinese people in any way, shape, or form or speak the language. The woman I mentioned earlier in the video, she literally came to Chengdu and didn't speak a word of Chinese because Shanghai you don't need to. And so if you're going to go live in a place like Shanghai or Beijing, or even Guangzhou to an extent, parts of Guangzhou, you actually are going to have to make an effort not to get totally sucked into a much larger expat community where essentially if you're an American, you're just chilling with Americans. If you're a Frenchman, you're going to be just hanging out with French guys all the time. And you're not even going to be part of this diverse community because there's, 5,000, 6,000 French people in Shanghai, where in Chengdu there might be 250 French people, right? Maybe 100, maybe 50. I know one, maybe two French guys. So anyway, that's the theme of my video. I know, again, a lot of you guys are thinking about moving to China. Throw any questions down there. Check out my other videos. Boom, 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 boom. Thank you for watching. Have a great rest of your day.